on today's family adventure as we visit 4 different locations in the Casco Bay area of Maine. Our adventure begins at the Portland Breakwater Lighthouse. Just a few hundred feet from the Breakwater Lighthouse, there is also the Liberty Ship Memorial, which we visited next. Both the lighthouse and the memorial are part of Bug Light Park. After spending some time at Bug Light Park visiting the locations there, you will see that we take a trip to another lighthouse that is only a mile away. Our next stop is Spring Point Ledge Lighthouse and also Fort Preble. Both the lighthouse and the fort are right next to each other. Since our visit to Portland Headlight at the end of September, I have become low-key obsessed with the lighthouses here in Maine, and we've actually set a family bucket list goal of visiting every single lighthouse in Maine. We have not set a time frame in which we hope to have this completed by. We want it to be a no-pressure situation and just fun, but whenever we can, we like to include visiting a lighthouse in our family adventure plans, and so it was wonderful to be able to check 2 off of our list on this family adventure. In addition to wanting to visit every lighthouse in Maine, I also want to learn about the history behind each of them. Most of them have been around for over 100 years and have lots of stories associated with them. So I'm going to share some of the history behind the lighthouses that we visit today. Portland Breakwater Light is more commonly known as Bug Light. It is located along the southern side of the entrance to Portland's inner harbor, and this lighthouse was designed to mark the end of a breakwater built in 1836 in response to popular demand. What did you find in there, Colin?
Water!
Water?
Yeah, there's water. And there's a rock right here.
There's a rock down there too?
Yeah, there's a rock that's stuck in
Don't put your knee or hand in this water, because that's not going to be comfy. What thing?
It looked like a tiny octopus.
Did it move?
Yeah. It's right under that rock. Under that rock.
Might have been a crab.
It was like this is stick stuck in black.
Was it seaweed?
It was like a black or brown or purple. It's a tiny octopus.
I mean, I guess it's a possibility.
What is it? Tiny octopus.
The breakwater was successful at keeping heavy swells and tides from damaging the wharfs and ships, but mariners protested that the unlit breakwater was more of a hazard than a harbor improvement, and so a lighthouse was placed at its outer end in 1855. Bug Light was originally an octagonal wooden tower equipped with a 6th-order Fresnel lens that shone 25 feet above high water. Although the lighthouse was close to civilization, it was an unpleasant keeper assignment. The uneven surface was difficult to walk upon during the best conditions and was nearly impassable in icy conditions. During storms, waves and spray battered the lighthouse and drenched the keeper. An extension of the breakwater was completed in September of 1873. A new lighthouse structure was built using a Greek design dating from the 4th century BC. Completed in 1875, the 26-foot cast iron tower is slightly shorter than its predecessor. The Portland Breakwater Lighthouse was electrified in 1934 and then watched over by the keeper at Spring Point Ledge. It was deactivated in 1942 and placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1973. The South Portland Rotary Club and the Spring Point Ledge Light Trust subsequently refurbished the lighthouse and reactivated it as a private navigational aid in 2003. It abuts a small park, Bug Light Park, which serves as a unique vantage point from which to view Portland Harbor. I was quite captivated by the more intricate details around the top portion of this lighthouse. It's not something you see on every lighthouse, so it really caught my attention, and it was something that I felt I needed to capture. Following a pretty intense wind and rain storm recently in December of 2022, there was a lot of damage to the coastal areas in Maine, and Bug Light was no exception. Luckily, the lighthouse has fared well, but there was a lot of debris that was washed up that we noticed on this day that we visited that was not long after that storm. Next up, we took a look around the Liberty Ship Memorial. The history of this memorial dates back to the 1940s. This scenic point of land overlooking Portland Harbor, where Bug Light Park stands today, was once home to a sprawling World War II shipyard that covered 140 acres of land, including over 60 buildings, and had the capacity to build up to 13 ships at one time. Between 1941 and 1945, the South Portland shipyards built 266 cargo vessels, 236 of which were Liberty ships, contributing immeasurably to the Allied victory in World War II. These two decided to have a little battle to see who could push the other off of the wall first. Luckily, no one was injured. Now back to the history of this memorial. When the war ended, so did the need for Liberty ships and the shipyards. In 1945, the Maine legislature responded to growing concerns over the economic future of the area by forming the Greater Portland Public Development Commission, or GPPDC, which acquired, leased, and managed the shipyard properties. Since its inception, the GPPDC has brought employment and economic benefits to the Greater Portland area. In 1996, a group of concerned South Portland residents organized to spearhead the effort to purchase and preserve a portion of the former shipyard property for use as a public park. On December 30th, 1996, with support from the City of South Portland, GPPDC, and the adjacent Portland Pipeline Corp., Bug Light Park became a reality. Meanwhile, the Bug Light Park Enhancement Group began working on plans for a memorial to honor South Portland's shipbuilding heritage. The Liberty Ship Memorial was conceived as a tribute to the thousands of men and women who worked at the South Portland shipyards, the seamen who faced the dangers of war on board the Liberty ships, all of those who served in the war and their families, and the South Portland residents who shared their backyard with a booming shipyard. Dedicated in a public ceremony in November 2001, this memorial strives to keep the spirit of the shipyard alive for future generations. The centerpiece of the memorial is a sculpture constructed of steel and standing over 35 feet tall and 65 feet long. Creating a sculpture that would be faithful to the details of an actual Liberty required extensive research, since only 2 of the original Liberty fleet still existed and original construction drawings were incomplete. The design team traveled to San Francisco and Toledo to photograph and measure the ships so that the sculpture would accurately portray the bow section of the Liberty ship. Next, our adventures bring us to Spring Point Ledge Light. This spark-plug lighthouse was constructed in 1897 by the government after 7 steamship companies stated that many of their vessels ran aground on Spring Point Ledge. Congress initially allocated $20,000 to its construction, although the total cost of the tower ended up being $45,000 due to problems with storms and poor quality cement. The lighthouse featured a fog bell that sounded twice every 12 seconds and a lantern fitted with a fifth-order Fresnel lens first lit by keeper William A. Lane on May 24, 1897. Improvements were made to the lighthouse throughout the 20th century. It was electrified in 1934, and in 1951 a 900-foot breakwater made from 50,000 short tons of granite was constructed in order to connect the lighthouse to the mainland. The lighthouse was originally owned and operated by the U.S. Coast Guard. On April 28, 1998, the Maine Lights Selection Committee approved a transfer of ownership of the tower to the Spring Point Ledge Light Trust, with the USCG retaining only the light and fog signal. On May 22, 1999, Spring Point Ledge Light was opened to the public for the first time in its history. It is a popular spot on any summer day for families to picnic and boat watch on the breakwater, or for fishermen to spend an afternoon catching fish. Adjacent to the lighthouse, visitors may also tour the old Fort Preble, the Southern Maine Community College campus, and visit a small gift shop. This lighthouse was added to the National Register of Historic Places as Spring Point Ledge Light Station on January 21, 1988. The tower of Spring Point Ledge Light is 25 feet, and the light elevation is 54 feet. This lighthouse is referred to as a spark plug lighthouse because it resembles the shape of a spark plug. On our visit to the lighthouse, we were noticing that the bottom rung of this ladder, there's one on this side as well as around on the other side of the lighthouse. Both of those bottom rungs were very thin and had been eaten away by the salt in the ocean waters. And it's just interesting to see how much damage the salt can do to even a metal structure like this. While we are at the beginning of our adventure to see all of the lighthouses in Maine, I have to say that the breakwater to get out to this one is a lot of fun. There are some large gaps in the big granite slabs or stones, but it is enjoyable to hop over them, get some energy out of the kids, and was manageable even for our smallest child, who is 4.5. This lighthouse is Fort Preble. Fort Preble was an active military garrison from 1776 until 1950. It was heavily used during the War of 1812, the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, and World War II. In 1776, a fort was constructed at Spring Point in what is now South Portland and named Fort Hancock after Massachusetts Governor John Hancock. It was fortified with cannons and ammunition and served as a strategic lookout point for enemies and as a protective garrison for privateers leaving Portland Harbor until the Embargo Act of 1808. In that year, the fort was revamped and renamed Fort Preble after Portland's famous son Commodore Edward Preble, hero of the Barbary Wars who died the previous year. Fort Preble saw active service during the two world wars but was decommissioned in 1950. The beautiful location, which had included a parade ground, hospital, barracks, and blacksmith shop, is now part of the Southern Maine Community College campus. In 1952, the fort was sold to the state of Maine. The Portland Harbor Museum lies within the walls of the fort, and Spring Point Ledge Lighthouse extends off the peninsula. Fort Gorges can be seen from the fort as well. that we had seen from the recent storm over at Bug Light was nothing compared to the damage that we saw here at Fort Preble. All of these stones here were not lying on the ground like this prior to that storm. They all fell during that storm, and it's just disheartening, crazy, hard to think about the fact that this fort has stood for so many hundreds of years and that this storm was able to do so much damage. There was just rocks and debris scattered about everywhere, and this is not how this area normally looks. To find a variety of sea glass when we visited, and that could be because the storm moved things around and sort of brought that sea glass to the surface, or this may be a location where sea glass is easily found regularly. Eli and I did visit Spring Point Ledge Lighthouse a couple of months ago, and we were down on the beach area, and we did find quite a few pieces of sea glass there. Today, that beach area was completely covered in water because the tides were very different between our two visits. And we also, just fun fact, since this is a bucket list thing that I've mentioned, we did not check Spring Point Ledge Lighthouse off of our list on that day because it was just Eli and I who visited, and in order for us to check it off of our bucket list, all 5 of our family members need to be present for the visit. These openings, window-esque areas, there was ground that had been washed away significantly. You can see that here, and just little pebbles and rocks scattered all about. The damage continued from the upper portion of the fort all the way down to the back end here. People had found quite a few pieces of sea glass and random artifacts, and they had just started to collect them on that rock that Colin and Charlie were looking at. This log seems like it washed up during the storm and caused that big block there to come loose and fall down. The sidewalk, you'll see a little bit later, just sort of falls off and does not continue at the end. And a gentleman who was visiting shared with us that the waves were coming up and over the walls of the fort during that storm. While I do not have any information on whether there is restoration efforts planned for this location after that storm, I do hope that there are, because it is a very historical location and I feel is worthy of being protected and resurrected. So hopefully over time we will see this area touched up and taken care of. invested about 3.5 hours of time into today's adventure to Bug Light, Liberty Ship Memorial, Spring Point Ledge Lighthouse, and Fort Preble. I would say if you wanted to visit these locations yourself, you could do so comfortably in 2 to 2.5 hours if you had a lesser amount of time. Given their close proximity to one another, I feel like this cluster of locations is fantastic to lump all into one trip. If the opportunity arises for you to visit these locations, I hope that you have a wonderful time. Thank you so much for joining my family and I on our adventure today. I hope that you enjoyed the sights, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye!